All right, Frank, another time to shine here. Of course, delivered by our friends at DoorDash Icebreakers. You wrote earlier this week that the Dallas Stars, I did at least, that the Dallas Stars to me are one of the most intriguing teams in the league. They've got parts that they can move, and they got parts that they can keep too. So is it possible that one of the players that you've had on your trade targets board could actually be staying put in Dallas?
Yeah, it's certainly possible, and that player is Joe Pavelski. I'm told, Mike, that the Dallas Stars and Joe Pavelski have engaged in preliminary contract discussions on what an extension might look like. And I think the biggest question that Jim Nill and the Stars had is, does Joe Pavelski want to stay in Dallas? And I believe the preliminary answer to that is yes. I don't believe this is quite at the imminent stage yet, but the fact that they're engaged in discussion and could get something done, I think the Stars certainly are hopeful that they could get something done, is a pretty big indicator in terms of what their thoughts are when it comes to the deadline and Joe Pavelski. I've sort of wondered to this point whether there could be a half measure that exists for the Stars. At this point, they are all in and focused on getting this team into the Stanley Cup playoffs. They had a Texas-sized win over the Winnipeg Jets on that front on Wednesday night. Another big game against the Nashville Predators to try and solidify their spot as the second or wild card against the Preds on Thursday night. So they're in a spot where they're talking to Pavelski. They'd like to keep him. They'd like to get something done. But you see the magical season that he's had, a career year. Through 50 games, he's never had 53 points. His previous highs were 51 and 50. So he's on pace for career numbers at the age of 37. And it sounds funny to say that a 37-year-old might be in line for a raise. The tricky part for this contract in working it out between Pavelski and the Stars, if they get there, will of course be term at that age. What kind of security can he get to want to remain and sign now in Dallas as opposed to chasing a Stanley Cup elsewhere or heading to market in the summer? I think he's liked the fit in Dallas to this point. We'll see where that goes.
It's really surprising that the San Jose Sharks essentially chose Erik Karlsson over Joe Pavelski. That's retrospective. That's past history. But Pavelski's done an amazing job in Dallas. I love that fit there. Most players like playing in Dallas. I did as well. Another team that you've had a couple of players on your trade targets list are the Columbus Blue Jackets. And some normal names that you'd expect out there. But is there anyone that's been surprising lately that's come up in the rumor mill?
Yeah, I think there's been a ton of intrigue. I would say, Mike, the Columbus Blue Jackets are one of the biggest wild cards when it comes to the deadline. No one knows exactly what they might be up to, and that's because they could be up to anything. We've got names on our list like Max Domi, Jack Roslovic has been there. What do they do with some of the other players that they have that are trending towards new contracts? But one name I can tell you that's popped up in recent days and weeks that they've been getting a lot of calls on is Alexander Texier. You look at the season that he's had breaking through on the scoring front, 11 goals. He's missed a few games to this point this season, but over an 82-game stretch, that is a 25 goal pace that Alexander Texier is on. Teams like his compete level. They like what he brings to the ice in terms of a more complete facet to his game. And so there's been lots of interest in Alexander Texier. And I'm told that should the right deal come down the pike for Texier, that the Columbus Blue Jackets certainly would be open to moving him. They've got a lot of decisions to make in terms of where that team is heading. A decided non-playoff team likely to this point, and certainly open to interpretation on that roster as to what Jarmo Kekalainen is going to decide. So Alexander Texier, a name, Mike, that's generating significant interest.
Yeah, curious to see what they do in Columbus. Maybe even I could even see hockey trades with the roster that they have, not just picks, prospects. It's just about everything. It's hard to predict what Jarmo Kekalainen may do in Columbus. Now, there was a report on Wednesday that the Nashville Predators are actively shopping Filip Forsberg. Do you believe that to actually be the case?
I don't. To this point, the people that I've checked in seem to be very surprised by the report. I think it's fair to say that to this stage, there has not been contract discussion between Filip Forsberg and the Nashville Predators, but there's really been no reason to. There's been no push. There hasn't been anything that's presented itself where Filip Forsberg has raised his hand or gone to the Nashville Predators and said, hey, I'd like out. There's been nothing close to that. He's been an absolute horse for this team this season. You look at the numbers that he's put up, 44 points in 38 games. He's been fantastic. He's a driver in every sense of the word for the Preds, and certainly someone that they need up front. It's going to be an interesting contract discussion, but I think there's been lots of patience there. And I think the Forsberg camp has been very understanding that for the Nashville Predators, all eyes are on the playoffs. That's a market that feels like they need to be in the mix in terms of the playoffs for gate revenue and monetary reasons. That market really seems to show up and stand up when it comes to playoff time. So their team is focused squarely on getting in. I don't believe that there's been much talk, if any, of moving Filip Forsberg, and lots of patience on his end. I think he'd be intrigued about the idea of staying. I think he'd also be open to the idea of going to market, but there's no pressure point coming here where Filip Forsberg is raising his hand saying, I got to get out of here. I'm asking out. I want out. So I think this report seemed to catch everyone that I spoke to by surprise.
Interesting. Well, I could see the Nashville Predators definitely wanting to keep Forsberg, but even making a push or adding players towards the deadline, Frank. That team is poised in the Central Division to make some noise. They hit a lull recently, but they've been good most of this year. Without a doubt, they want to win.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. This has been another edition of Icebreakers delivered by DoorDash. You see the promo codes at the bottom of your screen. If you're in Canada, DFODD. If you're in the United States, DFODDUS. They get you 25% off and free delivery on your first order. All your favorites and more delivered right to your door by DoorDash.